of building the broader and deeper relationship our leaders envision. So that says a lot about what we think of this new government, and we're excited about the possibilities we've begun working on together. And there are many other efforts we're working on together, and I know I'm supposed to limit my comments to 5 minutes, so I'll just touch briefly on 3 areas where I think we can see progress in the next 10 years. The first is expanding our cooperation on clean energy and climate change. We've already mobilized under the U.S.-India partnership to advance clean energy nearly $2.5 billion to invest in clean energy projects. We've agreed to make concrete progress this year towards phasing out hydrofluorocarbons under the Montreal Protocol, as well as pursuing a strong global climate agreement in Paris this year. And of course, we had the breakthrough on civil nuclear cooperation. Second, we're also cooperating on combating air pollution. Polluted air affects our health, quality of life, work productivity. Indian cities have gained attention recently for their problems with air pollution, and we've had similar problems in American cities less than 30 years ago, so we have a lot of knowledge we can share. And just last week, a team from the Environmental Protection Agency met with senior officials and experts at their counterparts here and other key ministries in Delhi, and these consultations will lead our countries in developing ways we can work together to address this challenge. We're also capitalizing on our long history of collaboration in the areas of development, health, and science. In the health and development sectors, we have been working to end preventable maternal and child deaths, both here in India and across the globe, and we're facilitating new partnerships to fight cancer through research, prevention, treatments, and the establishment of the India National Cancer Institute. These are areas where our long history of scientific partnership and cooperation can lead to accomplishments that improve global health. And finally, I want to make sure you all get your money's worth for attending today, so I'll raise a topic of great interest to my friends here on the panel, and that is the United States and India's expression of a shared vision for the Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean regions. Our shared goals include working together and with other interested partners on increasing regional economic integration, promoting accelerated infrastructure connectivity, and supporting a rules-based order. Far from being something designed to provoke, we believe our partnership can lead to a more peaceful, prosperous, and stable region to the benefit of all. So we're excited about this newly elevated partnership, what we're calling Strategic Plus, and there's clearly much more work we can do to realize its full potential. But ultimately, and to borrow from the theme of this particular panel, the United States and India have displayed a commitment to show up to the global high table together as partners whose shared values and interests transcend improving the well-being of our two nations exclusively. Rather, our partnership will continue to strive toward peace and prosperity for the entire world for generations to come. Thank you very much.
High Commissioner Patel.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining on a Saturday morning. And it's usually difficult for even one or two of us to get together on a normal day, but for all of us to come together on a Saturday morning like this is a testament to this conclave. So we're very delighted to have an opportunity to be here and see some of our colleagues not only here speaking but also around the room. From Canada's perspective, what I wanted to do is just offer up a few very brief remarks from a global perspective and then sort of bring it down to India, Canada, and the current relationship and where we see things going forward as a means to focus on the theme of the conclave. Against the current global backdrop, we see a number of trends that we're paying attention to and following in particular, and I won't touch on them all, but I will mention them, but I will touch on one in particular. The transition in the global economy that we're experiencing right now globally is very significant, underpinned by the rising demand for natural resources, notably energy, water, and food. And I'll touch on that in a few minutes, just a little bit more in substantial detail. And the reason I mention that is something very significant that underpins not only the Canada-India relationship, but a lot of what Canada is focusing its efforts on over the last little while. But there are a number of other trends globally that touch on the relationship and touch on what's happening here and roles and responsibilities that we play as ambassadors here in India. The threats, security threats posed by unconstrained or non-state actors such as terrorist, criminal, or extremist groups is something very significant. Rising inequality, including economic, technological, and gender-based. Growing food insecurity, the need to transform global governance structures to meet new challenges. Environmental challenges, technological revolution that brings global accessibility, but also poses the question of cybersecurity and related concerns, and shifting demographic patterns. The reason I wanted to mention those is when I go back to refer to the global backdrop of the global economy and focusing on the need to focus on some of our natural resource requirements, not only here in India and Canada and around the world, all of those areas or trends that I've mentioned are all interrelated in one form or another. But I do believe that we focus on the economic growth, economic issues, and some of those elements that my colleague has just touched on underpins opportunity to address a number of those other trends or concerns, whether it's security concerns or food security or whatever it may be. So the global economy in transition, and against that backdrop, long-term prospects for the world economy remain favorable, and Canada has seen that, has experienced that. Concerns over debt levels, capacity constraints, and the slow pace of reforms in emerging markets, emerging countries, is something that I think we need to be very mindful of. And there are significant challenges in some places around the world. Protectionism continues to be a concern. Long-term threats to the global economy stem from economic nationalism, increased security challenges in different places around the world. But the overall trend remains favorable, and I think we have a responsibility to play a role in addressing that, and I'll touch on that in just a second. The rising importance of natural resources. World demand for commodities is projected to rise. Energy and food demand alone could rise 50% by 2030. Renewable resources could face mounting pressures. Water scarcity is expected to be acute in the medium term, with 1 to 2 billion people at risk from depleting water resources as an example. Fisheries and forests continue to suffer from overexploitation in different places around the world, which have an impact on regional and global stability. And slower global economic growth, along with a surplus in oil supply, could put ongoing downward pressure on energy prices, which will result in a possible transfer of wealth. Now, against all of that backdrop, that defines a lot of what Canada focuses on now in the context of its priorities and areas of focus. For Canada, when you start looking at the importance of economic growth and how that contributes to societal development or addressing a number of these issues such as food security, food insecurity, safety and security of our citizens, we will continue to place a very strong emphasis in terms of really pushing that agenda. And we're doing so for a number of reasons. Traditionally, over the past several decades, well over 80% of our trade has been with the United States. And we appreciate that. That's not taken for granted, and that won't necessarily change in a dramatic fashion because the border, the interdependence of our economies will remain very, very important, and we'll continue to focus on that. But the Great Recession really taught us that it's important to diversify. It's important to diversify into different markets and opportunities, because if we don't do that, then all the other areas or trends that we're focused on or concerned about won't have an opportunity to adequately be affected or addressed. And so we have now focused a lot more of our energy in emerging markets like India, like China, and other places around the world like the Americas. And when we're seeing results of that. And so that underpins a very significant part of our relationship with India. When we start looking at the Canada-India relationship, our trade numbers are lower than what they should be. $6.2 billion in bilateral trade is not at all achieving what the full potential is. And so there's a concerted effort on focusing on increasing those trade numbers. And we will do that. And we'll do that working in tandem with Indian companies, Indian government. But what we're really focused on is what is the means to achieve that. And right now we have trade negotiations with India that have been in place for some time. We have investment agreement negotiations in place for some time. And these are enablers that will help us move in that direction. But what we're finding here is also it's not about one country taking on all of these challenges. There is room for multilateral work to be done. But there's no one-size-fits-all solution to really addressing whether it's economic challenges or any of the other trends that I've mentioned. And when we start focusing on the trade agreements as an example, we remain committed to the WTO and trade negotiations and multilateral fora, but we'll also go it alone and negotiate bilaterally with a number of countries. And the reason for that is not all solutions have the same sort of approach to take place. And so we'll work with the United Nations and other multilateral entities to address some of these things, but we will work directly with individual countries to address some of the challenges that we want to address. And so from that perspective, Canada really believes that the world needs more India, needs leadership from India. It's a model of democracy, pluralism, visionary economic and social development plans which guide not only here in India but other nations. And so with respect to Canada-India, we really see the current government's plans and vision very ambitious, and we're in full support of that, whether it's Make in India, whether it's Digital India, whatever it might be. And it just so happens that Canada has a lot to offer India in achieving that vision. You know, we've had recently The Economist ranked Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver as
to the economic high table of the world, to the Hanover Fair, the world's most important industrial trade fair, to inaugurate, together with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, this fair, where India is this year the partner country. And I'm convinced, having seen the preparations here in India, that India will stun the world. Dear friends, India in the world, there I can only say the world needs India at the global high table. Think about the global issues mentioned by my colleagues: terrorism, climate change, new conflicts, and economic crises. In a multipolar and globalized world, all these challenges can only be tackled jointly. This, of course, means also readiness to assume responsibility. But now comes my question. What is key to gain a permanent seat at the global high table? Strong economy, large population, functioning governance, global responsibility. India has certainly the potential, but how does it get there? It gets there by unleashing this potential. External empowerment requires internal empowerment. Prime Minister Modi said it: minimum government, maximum governance. Now, maximum governance is for those areas where the state has a role: security, public utilities, social system, including safeguards for the poor, judicial system, equal opportunities. But why minimum government? Or, as Aaron Puri said yesterday, letting go. Because it enables the empowerment of the citizens, the people of India. Since colonial days, the Indian people have been living under a cocoon of paternalism. If the old blanket of mistrust and control is lifted a bit, India would naturally unleash its economic and social enormous potential. Having been ambassador to India for nearly 3 years now, it is my impression that this empowerment is exactly what the people of India want. They want transparency at home and openness to the world. All over India, I have met these eager, bright, and talented kids learning German language. They are the real ambassadors of India. And I think that India can be proud of having such diligent, fast-learning, and open-minded kids. Secondly, women. In India, so far only 29% of women participate in the labor market. What a potential! India's potential women power is real superpower. Last Sunday, on International Women's Day, Manwara Begum spoke at the German embassy. She has been a strong and hard-working waste picker for more than 20 years. She has been persevering under difficult conditions with admirable dignity and tenacity. She spoke brilliantly. India can be proud of women like her. And lastly, an amazing Indian strength, Jugaad, a source of unlimited creative energy. If given space, Jugaad has the power to make India one of the global hubs of innovation. Dear friends, all these kids, women and creative minds, and of course also the men of India. Yesterday we have heard here Anand Kumar with his Super 30. All of them deserve respect, and they deserve trust. Cut the red tape, not their wings. And this would, as a consequence, enable their empowerment. It is about enlarging the space of action of the Indian people. They are the real potential. So unleashing this potential by empowerment must be the main concern. It is possible. If you have doubts, just look at us. In 2001, the British Economist had, for good reasons, a cover story on Germany titled "The Sick Man of Europe." Only 10 years later, the situation has totally turned around, thanks to the agenda of our former Chancellor giving more responsibility to the citizens. So it is possible. Dear friends, to sum up, an empowered Indian people will naturally lead to an empowered India. And an empowered India will naturally have its rightful place in the world, a place in the very exclusive club at the global high table. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Li Yucheng.
Good morning, distinguished guests. Thank you. I should say thank for the India Today Group for providing this wonderful platform for exchange viewpoints on bilateral or multilateral issues. Since recently, I have made take a lot of interview and wrote a lot of articles about our bilateral relations. There's a wide coverage of my articles, so I think I will not say more about our bilateral relations. I will put the emphasis of my remarks on the subject of development, because either China and India are largest developing countries, so we are centering on the development of our economy. And the development, though we have made tremendous progress in improving our life, in improving our economy, but development remains a major task for many countries and for the international community. There are many problems in the world now, as we see the unrest and instability in Middle East, conflicts in Iraq or Afghanistan, and the financial crisis, food security, climate change, and so on. So we need to address them. Certainly, of course, there are many reasons to these problems. But if we look into them deeply, we may find a root cause to these problems. It is poverty and underdevelopment. As Mahatma Gandhi said 70 years ago, that poverty is the worst form of violence. But today, after 70 years, the poverty remains the major challenge to us, and the development remains the paramount issue for many countries, especially against the backdrop of financial crisis and sluggish world economy. The issue of development looms even larger and figures more prominently. China and India, realizing that development is a primary and fundamental task. So we are undertaking, both countries are undertaking reforms and opening up. I've been here in India for half a year, 6 months. I've seen the dynamic development of economy, and the Indian government, under the leadership of His Excellency Prime Minister Modi, has made remarkable progress in